Part 1. Waking up in the Malibu villa. Emily Harper felt the first rays of sunlight brush across her eyelids, a warm sensation seeping through her skin, pulling her out of the fog of deep sleep. She heard the sound of waves crashing somewhere, steady and distant, like a whisper from the ocean. The scent of sea salt wafted through, mingling with something else, a familiar, warm, intimate fragrance that made her heart pound before she could even register where she was. She opened her eyes slowly, as if afraid the light would shatter the dream she had just left behind. But this wasn't a dream. Before her was a vast room, bathed in California sunshine. Floor-to-ceiling glass panels revealed a shimmering view of the Pacific Ocean, deep blue and endless. A gentle breeze slipped through a slightly open window, carrying the breath of the ocean and something else. A warmth, intimate, brushed against her cheek, making her skin tingle as if it were burning. She trembled, not from cold, but because the sensation was too real, too vivid. She turned her head slowly, and then she saw him, Ryan Carter. He stood there just a few steps away, his deep brown eyes gazing at her without blinking. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the top, revealing tanned skin, and his dark hair was slightly tousled by the sea breeze. He stood still, but his breath, soft, steady, seemed to bridge the distance between them, touching her, making her feel as though she were on fire. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice hoarse with surprise. Her heart pounded, as if it might break free from her chest. This couldn't be real. It couldn't be him, not after 5 long years of trying to erase him from her mind. But his gaze, the gaze that had once been her entire world, was still there, unchanged, only sharper now, like an invisible blade cutting through the shell she'd built to protect herself. She tried to sit up, but her body felt heavy, as if sleep refused to let her go. Her head throbbed, and a slight wave of dizziness washed over her. She raised a hand to her forehead, trying to recall what had happened. The beach, the dark night, the sketches in her hands blown away by the wind. She'd been working too hard, chasing deadlines for the new resort project in Malibu. She remembered collapsing onto the sand, her legs too weary to take another step. And then, darkness. "Are you okay?" His voice rang out, low and gentle, but carrying a weight that startled her. He stepped closer, and his breath brushed against her again, this time more distinct, hotter. She looked up, meeting his gaze, a mix of concern and something deeper, more intense that she didn't dare name. She paused, unsure of what to say. She glanced around, realizing she was lying on a gray leather sofa in the luxurious villa. A thin blanket covered her, surely placed there by him. On the table beside her was a glass of water, a few droplets clinging to its rim, as if it had just been brought over. She looked at the glass, then at him, searching for a rational explanation for his presence here, in her life, after everything. "I found you on the beach," Ryan said, as if reading her thoughts. He sat down in the chair across from her, keeping his distance, as though afraid that coming closer might break something fragile between them. "You fainted. I couldn't leave you there." She frowned, trying to piece together her scattered memories. What were you doing in Malibu?" Her voice trembled, uncertain if she wanted to hear the answer. Malibu was where she'd chosen to escape, to start over. This wasn't a place he was supposed to be. Ryan didn't answer immediately. He tilted his head, looking at her, his gaze piercing through her, as if searching for something she'd kept hidden for years. "Work," he finally said, his voice soft but firm. "I was scouting locations for a new project, but maybe fate had other plans." Fate. The word echoed in her mind, heavy and haunting. She wanted to argue, to say it was just a coincidence, that he shouldn't be here, that she didn't want him here. But the words stuck in her throat, blocked by memories flooding back like a tidal wave. She remembered the last time they'd seen each other, a rainy night in New York, 5 years ago. Her small apartment in Brooklyn had been awash in the dim glow of golden lights. They'd argued, not over anything significant, but because of the invisible pressures weighing on them both. Yet amid the sharp words, he'd pulled her into his arms and kissed her. A deep, desperate kiss, as if he knew it was the end. And it was. She'd left right after. without looking back, leaving him with a pain she couldn't face. "I don't need your help," she said, her voice harder than she intended. She pushed the blanket aside, intending to stand, but her legs trembled, refusing to cooperate. She sank back onto the sofa, her breathing rapid. Ryan stood up quickly, reaching to steady her, but she raised a hand to stop him. "Don't!" He froze, his hand hovering in midair. "You're still as stubborn as ever," he said, a faint smile crossing his lips before it quickly faded. He turned, picked up the glass of water from the table, and handed it to her. "Drink this. You need it." She looked at the glass, then at him. There was something in his gesture, the familiar gentleness, the unspoken care, that made it impossible for her to refuse. She took the glass, her fingers trembling slightly as they brushed against his. A small jolt ran through her, subtle but enough to startle her. She took a sip, the cool water sliding down her throat, but it couldn't quench the burning inside her. She set the glass down, trying to regain her composure. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter than she'd meant. "But I have to go. I have work." "You're not going anywhere in this condition," Ryan interrupted, his voice firm but not harsh. He sat down again, closer this time, close enough for her to feel his warmth. "Just for a little while, Em. Rest." She wanted to argue, to stand up and walk out of this villa, away from his presence. But his gaze held her there, a look both pained and tender, like an unspoken plea. She knew that look. She'd seen it hundreds of times in the days they were together, when he gazed at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. She turned her face away, staring out at the sea through the glass. The waves lapped silently against the shore, the sunlight glinting off the water like thousands of diamonds. She tried to focus on the scene, to forget his breath, his warmth, his closeness. But it was futile. He was here, truly here, and she didn't know what to do with the emotions swelling inside her. "You shouldn't be here," she finally said, her voice trembling. We're done, Ryan." He didn't respond right away. She heard him exhale slowly, as if holding something back. "Done?" he repeated, his voice so low it was almost a whisper. "Is that what you really think?" She turned back to look at him, and what she saw in his eyes made her heart clench. Not anger, not blame, but pain. The pain she'd left him with 5 years ago. A pain she'd thought time would erase. But it was still there, clear and alive, like a scar that had never healed. "You don't have the right to ask me that," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. She stood again, her legs steadier this time. She stepped toward the door, but he rose quickly, blocking her path. "Emily," he called, his voice soft but firm. "Just 1 minute. Hear me out." She stopped, not because she wanted to, but because her body betrayed her again. She stood there a mere step away from him, close enough to feel his breath against her hair, hot and intimate. She trembled, unable to hide the sensation. "I'm not here just for work," he said, his voice dropping, like a confession. "Not entirely. I came to Malibu because I knew you were here. I've been looking for you, Em, for 5 years. His words struck her like a blade, slicing through the defenses she'd built. She stared at him, her eyes wide with shock. "Looking for me?" she repeated, her voice hoarse. "Why?" Ryan stepped closer, just a small step, but enough for his warmth to envelop her. He didn't touch her, but his gaze, intense, sincere, held her like an invisible embrace. "Because I couldn't stop," he said, his voice quivering slightly. "Because I couldn't live without knowing where you were, how you were. Because I couldn't stop loving you, Emily." She stood frozen, her breath ragged, her heart pounding so hard she feared he could hear it. She wanted to say something, to push him away, to flee from those words, from the emotions surging within her. But she couldn't. She just stood there looking at him, and in that moment, all the years apart seemed to melt away. "Ryan," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why are you here?" He smiled, a sad but gentle smile, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because I couldn't stop looking for you," he replied softly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She said nothing more. She just stood there in the middle of the Malibu villa by the sea, with the sunlight, the breeze, and his breath, the breath that had once been her home, and now, after everything, still made her tremble. Part 2. The Past. A Deep Love in New York. Emily Harper never imagined that the love of her life would begin with a moment so foolish she wanted to dig a hole and disappear into it. It was a gentle April evening, 5 years ago, at an interior design exhibition in Manhattan. The luxurious gallery space was bathed in warm golden light, with sketches and models delicately displayed on polished wooden stands. Emily, then a young designer full of passion, stood amid the crowd, holding a glass of red wine, trying to impress a few potential clients with her bold ideas about minimalist living spaces. She was passionately describing how natural light could transform a room when her foot accidentally caught the cord of a floor lamp on display. In an instant, her body lost balance. The wine glass tipped, and the crimson liquid splashed straight onto the pristine white shirt of a man standing a few steps away. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the quiet room, and it seemed as if the entire space held its breath. Emily looked up in panic, intending to apologize, but the words stuck in her throat when she met the warm, deep brown eyes of him. Ryan Carter. "Well, I didn't know this exhibition included a wine bath," he said, his low voice laced with humor, a slight smirk lighting up his angular face. The crowd around them burst into laughter, a few even clapping as if it were an unexpected performance. Emily blushed to the tips of her ears, feeling as though the floor might crack open and swallow her whole. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she stammered, fumbling for tissues from her purse to wipe the wine off his shirt. But the more she wiped, the worse the stain spread, and she only made him wetter. "I didn't mean to, I swear, I'll pay for your shirt." Ryan tilted his head, looking at her with a mix of curiosity and amusement, as if she were something worth exploring. "It's fine," he said gently, taking her hand to stop her futile wiping. His touch was warm, firm, and she felt a small jolt run through her. "But if you're going to turn me into an abstract painting, at least tell me your name first." She looked up, meeting his gaze, and gaze not just warm, but sparkling with sincerity, as if he didn't care about the shirt and only wanted to know who she was. In that moment, all her embarrassment melted away, replaced by a strange feeling, as if she'd just found something vital she hadn't known she needed. "Emily," she replied, her voice quiet but steady. "Emily Harper." "Ryan Carter," he answered, holding her hand a little longer than necessary, his fingers brushing lightly over her wrist before letting go. "And I think I just found a reason to stay at this exhibition longer than I planned." The crowd gradually dispersed, laughter and chatter resuming, but Emily and Ryan seemed to slip into a world of their own. They left the exhibition together, not to clean the wine, his shirt still sported a comical patchwork of stains, but to grab a coffee at a small nearby cafe. Under the cafe's dim, hazy lights, they sat across from each other, talking until late into the night, from her sketches to his dreams, from silly childhood stories to the things they wanted to achieve in life. When the clock struck 2 in the morning, Ryan took her hand across the table, smiling. "I never thought a spilled glass of wine would be the most beautiful start to my life." That was how they met, a clumsy, humorous, yet fateful beginning. Emily was drawn to Ryan's warmth, the way he turned her awkward moment into a cherished story, the way he looked at her as if she were the only thing that mattered in that crowded room. And Ryan was captivated by the brilliance in her eyes, the talent that shone through every word she spoke, every sketch she showed him afterward, and the sincerity in her smallest gestures. Their love blossomed from there, slowly but fiercely, like a flame kindled from a tiny spark, burning bright and warm in the cold heart of New York. In the days that followed, their love bloomed through simple yet breathtakingly beautiful moments. Evening walks along the Hudson River became their favorite routine. They held hands, the cool river breeze blowing through, the city lights reflecting on the water like fallen stars. Ryan told her about his dream of building a real estate empire, his voice full of passion but softening whenever he turned to look at her. Emily shared her sketches, the spaces she wanted to create to bring joy to others, and he listened, his eyes lighting up as if she were painting his entire world. Once they stopped by the riverbank beneath a small bridge, the streetlights casting a glow on his face, highlighting his sharp features. He pulled her close, whispering, "You know, when I'm with you, I feel like I can do anything." She smiled, resting her head on his shoulder, and they stood there in silence, letting the sound of the flowing water and their heartbeats tell stories without words. The long nights in Emily's small Brooklyn apartment were their sweetest memories. Under the city's dim golden lights, she sat sketching at the kitchen table, her brown hair loosely tied, revealing the pale curve of her neck. Ryan made coffee, sometimes watching her quietly from behind, his gaze tender as if he could stay there forever. Once he walked over, set a steaming mug beside her, and wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "You're most beautiful when you work," he whispered, his breath grazing her neck, sending a shiver through her from the warmth. "Don't distract me," she teased, pretending to grumble, but unable to hide the smile on her lips. He kissed her hair lightly, whispering, "I'm not promising anything. How could I take my eyes off you?" They laughed, and those moments, small, intimate, became precious gems in their hearts. They dreamed of a future together, a house by the sea with big windows overlooking the ocean, where Emily could sketch in the morning light and Ryan could sit beside her, reading or telling her about his projects. They dreamed of a small family, children running around with ringing laughter, and a life where they could be themselves together. "I want us to grow old together," Ryan once said, holding her hand tightly on a cold night in Central Park, their breaths turning to white mist in the air. "I want to see you every day until my hair turns gray." She laughed, tears glistening in her eyes, and replied, "Then you'd better keep your word." Their love wasn't just sweet words or romantic gestures. It was a deep connection, the way they supported each other through tough days. When Emily worried about a big project, Ryan stayed up all night with her, brewing hot tea and sitting by her side, even though he knew nothing about design. When Ryan was stressed over a real estate deal, Emily pulled him away from his desk, making him walk under the moonlight to forget his pressures. They were each other's strength, a light in dark times, and with every day together, their love grew deeper. Their happiness peaked on a frigid winter night on the Brooklyn Bridge. The wind blew fiercely, cutting through Emily's thick coat, but she didn't feel the cold. They just watched a light show in Manhattan, and Ryan suggested walking across the bridge to see the city from afar. Beneath the faint streetlights, he stopped in the middle of the bridge, holding her hand tightly. "Are you cold?" he asked, his voice full of concern. "No, not with you here," she replied, smiling. He looked at her, his eyes shining like stars in the New York sky, and then he knelt down, his hands trembling as he pulled a small box from his coat pocket. The wind whipped through, tousling her hair, but she didn't care. He opened the box, revealing a simple yet elegant silver ring, beautiful like their love itself. "Emily Harper," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "You're my forever. You're the one who makes me laugh, makes me dream, makes me want to be a better man every day. Will you marry me?" She stood still, her breath turning to white mist in the cold air. Her heart pounded, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from the chill, but from the overwhelming joy. "Yes," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Yes, Ryan, I'll marry you." He smiled, a radiant smile like sunlight in winter, and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it were made for her. He stood, pulled her into his arms, and held her tight, and they kissed amid the winter wind, his warm lips on hers as if the world contained only the two of them. They stood there embracing, letting the wind carry away all sound, leaving only the rhythm of their beating hearts. "I promise I'll give you the world," he whispered, his hand gently stroking her hair. She pressed against his chest, whispering, "You're already my whole world." It was the most beautiful moment of their lives, a promise, a love, and a brilliant future ahead. But that happiness didn't last forever. One afternoon a few weeks later, everything changed. Emily was at the apartment, organizing her sketches, when the door opened, and Ryan's father, James Carter, walked in. He was a tall, stern man with cold, sharp eyes she'd never seen in Ryan. He didn't greet her, didn't beat around the bush, but got straight to the point. "You're not worthy of my son." She froze, unable to comprehend what was happening. James continued, his voice cold but weighty. Ryan turned down a big opportunity in London because of you. A position that could take him to new heights, but he chose to stay here, for you. You're holding him back, Emily. If you truly love him, you'd understand he deserves better, a bigger future, than being tied down by an ordinary designer like you. His words stabbed into her heart like a knife. She wanted to argue, to shout that she wasn't a burden, that their love was strong enough to overcome anything. But deep down, doubt crept in. Ryan had never told her about the London opportunity, but she knew him, knew he'd sacrifice everything for her without hesitation, and that terrified her. She feared that her love, no matter how beautiful, would be the chain holding him back, keeping him from soaring as he deserved. That night she sat alone in the apartment, the dim golden light shining on the ring on her finger. She imagined Ryan in a luxurious London office, wildly successful, his smile lighting up international headlines, but without her by his side. She wondered if she was truly the best thing for him, or just a beautiful dream he'd regret clinging to. Tears fell, rolling down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She'd made her decision. She wrote a short note, her hand trembling as she put pen to paper. "Find your future without me." She slipped the ring off, placing it beside the note, each movement tearing her heart apart. She packed a few essentials, a small suitcase, some clothes, and one last sketch she'd drawn for him, then left the apartment before Ryan returned. She couldn't face him, couldn't look into his eyes and say goodbye. She chose to run, believing it was the best thing for him, even though it killed a part of her soul. Ryan came home that night, holding a bouquet of white roses, her favorite flower, to apologize for a minor argument earlier about him working too hard. But the apartment was empty, cold, as if all warmth had been drained away. He saw the note on the table, reading it over and over, as if he couldn't believe his eyes. The ring sat there, cold and silent, like a final verdict. He stood stunned, his hands shaking as he clutched the note, his heart shattering into pieces. "Emily!" he shouted, his voice breaking in the silent apartment. He rushed outside, running to the nearest train station, hoping to catch her. Rain began to fall, icy droplets soaking through his clothes, but he didn't care. He reached the station, looking around desperately, but only saw her figure fading behind the closing train doors. He stood there motionless, rain mixing with the tears on his face, his heart broken. He gripped the bouquet tightly, white petals falling, scattered onto the wet ground, like fragments of the love they once had. Meanwhile, Emily sat on the train, staring out the misty window. The lights of New York receded into the distance, like shards of the life she'd once had. A life filled with Ryan, with love and hope. Tears silently rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. She told herself, this is for him, trying to believe she'd done the right thing, that she'd set him free for a brighter future. But deep inside, she felt hollow, as if she'd left her entire soul in New York, beside Ryan, the man she loved more than anything in the world. She didn't know that. At that moment, Ryan still stood in the rain, watching the train disappear, the white roses falling apart in his hands. He whispered into the night, his voice hoarse with pain. "I'll find you, Em, no matter how long it takes." It wasn't just a promise to her, but a vow to his own heart, a heart that couldn't live without her. Part 3, 5 years apart, longing and persistence. Emily Harper left New York on a cold, rainy night, carrying a small suitcase and a broken heart. She had no clear plan, only knowing that she needed to leave, far away from Ryan, from the sweet and painful memories he'd left within her. Her first stop was Boston, a cold and unfamiliar city where she hoped to bury her longing beneath endless hours of work. In Boston, she rented a small apartment near downtown, where the sound of car horns and the bustling pace of life might drown out thoughts of Ryan. She threw herself into work, taking on every interior design project she could, from modest apartments to luxurious offices. Her sketches carried a melancholic beauty, as if every line was imbued with the sadness she never spoke aloud. But when night fell, when she sat alone in her silent room, Ryan's image resurfaced. His warm smile, the gentle look in his eyes when he gazed at her, and that final desperate kiss under New York's lights. She knew she couldn't stay in Boston forever, Her longing for Ryan didn't fade as she'd hoped. It only grew quietly, like a shadow stretching longer with time. After 2 years, she moved to Seattle, where ceaseless rain and a gray sky seemed to mirror her mood. There she kept working, but she also began seeking other ways to fill the void. She became a volunteer at a local orphanage, spending weekends playing with the children, reading them stories, and helping them decorate their tiny rooms. The children brought her a bit of joy, their innocent smiles, their sudden hugs, but they also made her miss Ryan more. She'd once dreamed of a family with him, of their children running around a seaside home. Each time she thought of it, she told herself, "I'm not allowed to miss him." She tried to fill her time, leaving no moment idle, but the longing still slipped through every crack, like water seeping through fissures. Finally, after 3 years of wandering, Emily settled in Malibu, California. She came for a major project, designing the interiors of a luxurious seaside resort. Malibu was a stark change. Radiant sunshine, steady ocean waves, and the salty air of the sea. She thought this place might help her forget, that its light and vibrancy would erase the darkness in her heart. But she was wrong. The sea reminded her of their evening walks by the Hudson River, and the sunlight brought back the way Ryan used to hold her hand under the city lights. In Malibu, she lived a reclusive life. She rented a small apartment near the beach, spending her days with sketches and her evenings at a nearby orphanage, teaching the kids to draw and telling them stories. She turned down every invitation, from colleagues, from men who noticed her at cafes or on the beach. "I don't have time," she always said. But the truth was, she didn't want to open her heart. Ryan was still there, in every corner of her soul, a memory she couldn't erase. Meanwhile, in California, Ryan Carter built a life anyone would envy. After Emily left, he moved from New York to Los Angeles, where he rose to become the CEO of a major real estate company. He was successful, wealthy, and respected, but he was lonely. Lavish dinner parties, handshakes with partners, and million-dollar deals couldn't fill the emptiness Emily had left behind. He kept the engagement ring in his suit pocket, a reminder of the promise he'd once made to her. Every day he took it out, rolling it between his fingers, wondering where she was, what she was doing. Not a day passed without him thinking of her, her smile when he'd spilled wine on his shirt, her eyes when they dreamed of a future together, and the pain in his heart when she vanished. Ryan refused to accept losing her. He hired private investigators, tracking her through the design projects she left behind. He knew her style, the graceful lines, the refined blend of modern and warm, as well as he knew his own heart. He found traces of her in Boston, but by the time he arrived, she was gone. He followed her to Seattle, only to learn she'd left just weeks before. Each time he was one step behind, and each time it fueled his determination even more. He didn't open his heart to anyone else. Friends and family urged him to forget Emily, to find someone new, but he only gave a faint smile. "She's the only one," he said, and they didn't understand. He didn't want someone else. He wanted Emily, the one who'd made him laugh in his silliest moment, who'd made his heart race with just a glance. There were moments when they nearly crossed paths but never realized it. Once, in Seattle, Emily stumbled across an article in Architectural Digest about a major real estate project in California. She saw Ryan Carter's name in the piece, accompanied by a photo of him standing in front of a modern building, his familiar smile tinged with a quiet sadness in his eyes. Her heart ached, as if squeezed by an invisible hand. She stared at the photo for a long time, her fingers tracing his face on the page. But then she folded the magazine shut, telling herself, "He's better off without me." She didn't know that. At that very moment, Ryan was just a few miles away, checking a site she'd recently abandoned. These invisible intersections happened many times over the 5 years, like a thread of fate drawing them closer, but never quite enough to bring them together, until Malibu. Everything changed one summer morning in California. Ryan received an invitation to Malibu to survey a coastal plot for a new resort project. He wasn't particularly excited. Such business trips had become routine. But when he reviewed the interior design sketches for the project, his heart skipped a beat. The lines, the color choices, the subtle elegance in every detail. It was Emily's style. He knew it instantly, an instinct he couldn't mistake. "I need to go there," he told his assistant, his voice resolute. Right now. He drove from Los Angeles to Malibu, his heart beating faster with every mile. When he arrived, California's brilliant sunshine stretched across the beach, waves lapping steadily against the golden sand. He stepped out of the car, breathing in the salty sea air, feeling that she was close, closer than she'd been in 5 years. Ryan walked along the beach, his eyes scanning every person, every corner, like a hunter seeking the most precious treasure of his life. And then he saw her, Emily, standing silently at the water's edge, her brown hair fluttering lightly in the sea breeze. She wore a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled up, her bare feet touching the waves. She gazed out at the ocean, her eyes distant, unaware that he was approaching. He stopped a few dozen meters away, his breath quickening. 5 years of waiting, 5 years of searching, all led him to this moment. She was as beautiful as the day he met her. No, more so, with a melancholy grace he'd never seen before. He wanted to run to her, to call her name, but his feet felt rooted to the sand. He just stood there watching her, his heart pounding so hard he feared she might hear it. Emily didn't know he was there. She stood still, letting the waves wash over her feet, trying to find some peace in the sound of the sea. But deep inside she felt something, a strange sensation, as if someone were watching her, as if a part of her were calling her to turn around. She didn't turn, didn't look back, but her heart began to beat faster, as if it knew something she hadn't yet dared to acknowledge. Ryan clutched the ring in his pocket, his fingers gripping it so tightly his knuckles turned white. "Emily," he whispered into the breeze, his voice so soft only he could hear it. He stepped forward slowly, one step at a time, never taking his eyes off her. He knew this moment would change everything, and he was ready. Part 4. Reunion. Emotions overflowing. Emily woke up for the second time in Ryan's seaside Malibu villa, her body still heavy from the exhaustion of the previous night. The first time she opened her eyes, brilliant sunlight streamed through the glass, and Ryan was there, so close that his breath grazed her skin. She had tried to leave, her trembling legs taking her toward the door, but her body betrayed her. Her mind spun, her limbs too weak to hold her up. Ryan had caught her as she fell, his voice low but firm. "You're not going anywhere." She wanted to resist, but her eyelids grew heavy, and darkness pulled her back into deep sleep, keeping her in the villa. Now, as she woke again, the faint light of late afternoon filtered through the glass, illuminating the polished wooden floor. She lay on a large bed, a thin blanket draped over her, and the steady sound of ocean waves echoed from a distance, a reminder that she was still here, near him. Her head still ached, though not as intensely as before. She sat up slowly, feeling her body had improved, though still weak. She recalled the moment before she'd fainted again, Ryan's gaze, his breath, and the way he held her as if he couldn't bear to lose her once more. She turned her head, and her heart clenched when she saw him, Ryan Carter, leaning against the frame of the door leading to the balcony, his deep brown eyes fixed on her without blinking. He wore a gray shirt, sleeves rolled up, his tall frame exuding a weariness she'd never seen before. They faced each other in silence, the space between them seeming to hold all 5 years of separation. Longing, pain, and unspoken words. Finally, he stepped into the room, breaking the silence with a low, weighty voice. "Why did you leave?" he asked, his gaze locking onto hers, leaving her no escape. Emily lowered her head, her hands gripping the edge of the blanket tightly. She'd known this question was coming, but it still made her tremble. "Because I thought I was holding you back," she replied softly, her voice breaking, like a confession she'd kept hidden for too long. Ryan didn't respond immediately. She heard him take a deep breath, as if suppressing something. She looked up, meeting his eyes, pained, intense, but not accusatory. He stepped closer, just one step, but enough for her to feel his warmth, his breath brushing lightly against her cheek, hot and intimate. She trembled, her body reacting before her mind could stop it. "Is that what you really think?" he asked, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. He stood there close enough that she could smell his familiar scent, a hint of wood and sea, a scent that had once meant everything to her. She stood abruptly, her legs steadier this time, intending to head for the door. "I need to go," she said, her voice shaky, as if leaving were the only way to protect herself from what was about to happen. She didn't want to face him, didn't want her heart to weaken again. But Ryan was faster. He moved forward, blocking her path, his hand grasping her wrist gently but firmly. "You're not going anywhere," he said, his gaze unwavering, never leaving her. "Not until you hear me out." "Ryan," she whispered, trying to pull her hand free, but his touch, gentle, warm, left her motionless. His breath came closer, brushing her cheek, making her skin burn. She stepped back, her back hitting the wall, but he didn't let go. He stepped nearer, so close that she felt the heat from his chest searing her through her thin shirt. "I can't," she said, her voice faltering. "I can't do this again." "You never asked what I wanted," he said, his voice lowering, full of emotion. "You decided for me, left without giving me a chance to say that I didn't need anything but you." His words cut through her like a knife, slicing apart the reasons she'd once used to justify her choice. She opened her mouth to argue, but tears spilled out before she could stop them. "Your father," she sobbed, her voice choked. "He said I wasn't worthy of you. He said you turned down London because of me, that I was holding you back. You never told me, Ryan. I thought I had to leave, to give you a better future." Ryan froze, his grip tightening slightly around her wrist. "My father?" he repeated, his voice trembling with anger and pain. "He said that to you?" She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He came to see me before I left New York. He said you'd regret staying for me. I didn't want you to lose everything, Ryan. I didn't want to be a burden." Ryan released her hand, but not to pull away. He lifted his hand, gently touching her cheek, wiping away her tears with his thumb. His hands shook, as if he were trying to hold back a tide within him. "Emily," he said, his voice breaking, "you're my dream, not some job in London. I didn't need London, didn't need anything if I didn't have you." She looked at him, her eyes blurred with tears. His words reached deep inside her, melting the ice she'd built around her heart. She wanted to believe him, to let herself fall into him again, but fear of the past repeating itself, held her back. "But if I stay," she whispered, "what if I make you lose everything?" Ryan didn't answer with words. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly, his warmth enveloping her like a promise. She rested her head against his chest, hearing his heart beat strong, feeling his breath against her hair. "I lost everything when you left," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't you see? Without you, nothing mattered." She cried, unable to hold back any longer, her tears soaking into his shirt. She leaned into him, feeling the familiar warmth that had once been her home, the place where she'd found peace. 5 years of separation, 5 years of loneliness, all dissolved in his embrace. She wanted to push him away, to step out that door and run from this feeling. But she couldn't. Her body was still weak, but that wasn't what kept her there. It was her heart, a heart that didn't want to leave him again. She looked up, gazing into his eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered, her voice so soft it was nearly drowned by the sound of the waves outside. "I'm scared the past will happen again, that I'm not good enough for you." Ryan tightened his arms around her, leaning down to whisper in her ear, his breath hot against her skin. "I'll fight for us this time," he said, his voice firm yet tender. "I won't let you go again, Em. Never." She stood still in his embrace, feeling his warmth spread through every fiber of her being. She glanced at the door leading outside, just a few steps away, and for a fleeting moment she thought of walking out, leaving him again, like she had 5 years ago. But then she looked into his eyes full of love, patience, and promise, and she knew she couldn't go. Not because her body was still weak, but because she didn't want to. She wanted to stay with him. She gave a faint smile, the first time in so long that her heart felt lighter. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling. He smiled, a gentle but certain smile. Surer than anything in my life, he replied, and then he leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. The kiss wasn't intense, wasn't demanding, but it was enough to melt her, enough for her to know he meant it. They left the room, stepping out onto the villa's small balcony. The sun had set, leaving a vibrant sunset sky on the horizon. They sat side by side on a wooden bench, the waves lapping gently against the sand below. Ryan took her hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, holding so tightly she could feel every pulse in his veins. She rested her head on his shoulder, their breaths mingling in the salty sea air. Neither spoke, but the silence between them wasn't empty. It was filled with emotions that needed no words. She felt his warmth, his breath against her hair, and for the first time in 5 years, she no longer trembled with fear. She stayed, not because she couldn't leave, but because she chose to stay, with him. They sat there together, under the Malibu sky, hand in hand, like an unspoken promise, that this time they wouldn't let each other slip away. Part 5. Conclusion. A love made whole. The sunset painted the Malibu sky a brilliant gold, streaks of orange and pink blending over the shimmering sea. Emily and Ryan sat side by side on the wooden bench on the villa's balcony, his hand tightly interlaced with hers, their breaths mingling in the salty ocean air. After the tearful confrontation in the room, after the confessions and the truth that burst forth, they had found each other again, not just for a moment, but forever. But there was still one knot left to untie. Emily sensed a slight tension in the way Ryan held her hand, as if he were waiting for something. She looked up, meeting his gaze, deep, resolute, but tinged with a hint of unease. I need to call my dad, he said, his voice low but certain. We can't start over if I don't clear things up. She nodded, though her heart tightened as she recalled her encounter with his father, James Carter, the man who had driven her away from Ryan 5 years ago. She no longer blamed him, not anymore, but the wound still lingered. Ryan stood, pulling his phone from his pocket, and stepped to the edge of the balcony, where the sound of the waves could soften some of the strain in his voice. Emily sat there watching his back, listening as he spoke. Dad, he said, his voice ringing out in the quiet space, I need to talk to you about Emily. She couldn't hear the other end of the line, but Ryan's tone grew firmer. No, you don't understand. She's my choice. She always has been. You had no right to decide for me, no right to say those things that made her leave. He paused, taking a deep breath, as if holding back anger. I didn't need London, didn't need anything you thought was good for me. I only needed her. Emily bowed her head, silent tears falling. She hadn't expected Ryan to confront his father like this, hadn't expected him to speak those words with such unshakable resolve. She heard him continue, his voice softening but still firm. I want you to apologize to her, not for me, but because she deserves to hear it. There was a long silence. Then Ryan turned back, handing her the phone. He wants to talk to you, he said, his gaze gentle yet encouraging. Her hand trembled as she took it, and James's voice came through the other end, low and slow, a far cry from the coldness of 5 years ago. Emily, he said, I was wrong. I thought I was protecting Ryan, but I didn't see that he needed you more than anything I could give him. I'm sorry for saying those things, for pushing you away. I hope you can forgive a stubborn old man like me. She swallowed hard, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked. I'm not angry anymore. I just want Ryan to be happy. She handed the phone back to Ryan, and he took her hand, squeezing it lightly as reassurance. He said a few final words to his father, then hung up, returning to sit beside her. It's done, he said, his voice relieved. Now there's nothing between us anymore. She gave a faint smile, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling his warmth spread through her. They sat there quietly, letting the sun set and the sound of the waves soothe the last remnants of their past wounds. As the final light of the sun faded on the horizon, Ryan stood, pulling her up with him. Come with me, he said, his voice carrying a gentle excitement. She let him lead her down to the beach, where the sand still held the day's warmth. They walked, barefoot, the waves lapping at their feet, and she sensed something was coming, a moment she'd been waiting for without daring to admit it. Ryan stopped, turning to face her. His eyes shone in the sunset glow, as if holding an entire sky of emotions. He pulled a small box from his pocket, the same box she'd seen 5 years ago, the one that held the engagement ring she'd left behind. "I kept it," he said, his voice trembling. "Every day for the past 5 years, I kept it to remind myself that I'd find you, and I wouldn't give up." She stood still, her heart pounding as he opened the box, revealing the simple yet elegant silver ring, the ring he'd chosen for her on the Brooklyn Bridge. He knelt down, right there on the damp sand of Malibu Beach, and looked up at her. "Stay with me," he said, his voice steady yet pleading. "Not because I need you, but because I want you. Today, tomorrow, and forever." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but this time not from pain. She nodded, her voice choked. "I will." He smiled, a radiant smile like Malibu sunshine, and slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had never left her. He stood, pulling her into his arms, and they kissed. A deep, tender kiss, full of promise, beneath the sunset and the sound of the waves. She rested against his chest, feeling his breath against her hair, his warmth enveloping her. "I thought I'd never have this again," she whispered, her voice shaky. He tightened his arms around her, whispering, "Me too, but now we have a lifetime to make up for it." In the days that followed, Emily and Ryan began building a future together, a future they'd once dreamed of, but never dared believe could come true. The Malibu Resort project became their shared passion. Emily took on the role of interior designer, bringing a refined, warm beauty to every space, reflecting their love. Ryan invested, turning the coastal land into more than just a destination, but a symbol of reunion and hope. They worked together, stayed together, each day a piece of the puzzle, completing the picture they'd left unfinished 5 years ago. Some mornings, Emily sat on the balcony with her sketches, and Ryan brought her a cup of coffee, placing a soft kiss on her forehead before returning to his own work. Some evenings, they walked along the beach, hand in hand, letting the waves wash over their feet and the moonlight illuminate the path ahead. Their life in Malibu wasn't just about work. They found joy in small things: picnics by the sea, cooking together in the villa's kitchen, and long nights by the fireplace, recounting the days they'd been apart. Emily no longer ran, no longer buried herself in work to forget her longing. She lived, truly lived, beside Ryan, and every day she felt his love, a steadfast, enduring love that time couldn't diminish. Ryan changed too. He was no longer the lonely man carrying the ring like a burden of the past. He laughed more. His eyes lit up whenever he looked at her, and he didn't hesitate to tell her she was the most precious thing in his life. They didn't rush. They had a lifetime to love, to heal, and to build what they'd once lost. One early morning, a few months after Ryan slipped the ring back onto her finger, Emily woke in the villa. Malibu's sunlight filtered through the glass, spilling onto the wooden floor, bringing the warmth of a new day. She lay in bed, feeling Ryan's warm breath against her neck. He was asleep, his arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer in his dreams. She smiled, a gentle, happy smile, watching him, his face relaxed, his dark hair tousled, his steady breathing like a silent promise. She turned carefully so as not to wake him and gazed at him in the soft morning light. This was her home. Not just the villa, not just Malibu, but Ryan, the man who'd searched for her through 5 years of separation, who'd never given up on her. She reached out, touching his cheek, her fingers brushing lightly over his skin, and whispered, "I'm home." Ryan stirred, his eyelids fluttering open, and he looked at her with sleepy eyes that sparkled with love. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice husky from just waking. "I said I'm home," she repeated, smiling, happy tears shimmering in her eyes. He pulled her closer, holding her tight against him, his breath warm against her neck, familiar and comforting. "So am I," he replied, his voice gentle but certain. "Me too." They lay there in each other's arms, the Malibu sunlight streaming through the window, enveloping them in a warm glow. The waves crashed steadily in the distance, a soundtrack to their love, a love that had overcome separation, transcended time, and become whole again, as it was in the beginning. As the months passed, Emily and Ryan continued their life in Malibu by the sea together. The resort was completed, becoming a place where people sought peace. But for them, it was a witness to their love, a reminder that no matter how long they'd been apart, they'd always find their way back to each other. She no longer trembled, no longer feared or doubted. The fears of the past had vanished, lost in the warmth of Ryan's breath, in the love he gave her. They were together not as an ending, but as a new beginning, a beginning opening up countless days ahead where they could love, live, and dream together. And under the Malibu sky, in that seaside villa, they remained, together at last. 1 year after Ryan slipped the ring back onto Emily's finger beneath the Malibu sunset, their seaside villa was filled with the clear, joyful laughter of a beautiful baby boy, Nathan Carter, the most precious gift their love had brought. Nathan was just 3 months old, with warm brown eyes identical to Ryan's and a radiant smile inherited from Emily. He lay in a white wooden crib designed by Emily herself, placed beside a large window overlooking the sea, where the early Malibu sunlight shone on his tiny face, highlighting his smooth skin and soft black curls. Emily stood by the crib, gently rocking Nathan, softly singing a lullaby she'd made up herself. Ryan stepped in, holding a cup of coffee for her, a tender smile spreading across his face as he looked at the two most important people in his life. "Is he demanding another song from Mom?" he whispered, wrapping his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. His breath brushed her neck, warm and familiar, a reminder of the love between them that never faded. "I think he likes my voice better than yours," she teased, turning to plant a light kiss on his cheek. Nathan stirred slightly, his tiny hand grasping Ryan's finger, and they both laughed, their hearts overflowing with happiness. Outside, the waves rolled steadily, sunlight streaming through the window, enveloping their little family in a warm glow. "We did it, Ryan," Emily whispered, her eyes sparkling. He squeezed her hand tightly, replying, "And I wouldn't trade this for anything in the world." Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.